Are you thinking about starting a business or a startup but don't know how to? Or are you an entrepreneur looking to learn from others in the field? Don't worry, we've got you covered.
Entrepreneurship can be a challenging and an intimidating journey, especially if you're just starting out. And that's why we've created Linked, a podcast aimed at helping you overcome your challenges and achieve your goals. I'm your host, Jahnavi,
And I'm Deekshith.
and our goal is to provide you with the knowledge, inspiration, and tools you need to take the leap and achieve your entrepreneurial dreams.
Through this podcast series, we'll be having a conversation with startup founders, entrepreneurs, angel investors, and venture capitalists to help equip you with the knowledge to start your own journey.
I went to MIT, I got my undergraduate, and the first year into MIT, it was pretty intense. Loved Hewlett-Packard. I could never go back to a big company again. And now today I'm in my eighth either startup or early stage company that I've been involved with since Hewlett-Packard. We just got this nice funding, and we've also, when we hit this $1 million from the National Science Foundation, that qualified us for a matching grant from the state of Colorado. The state of Colorado is a wonderful place. When you start a company, surround yourself with other people, mentors, and other people that could help you.
Today's guest is Jim Pollock.
Jim is the CEO of Luminastra.
Hi Jim, welcome to our podcast, and we're absolutely honored to have you as our first guest.
Well, I'm excited to be here.
Jim, firstly, I would just want to ask you about how would you describe yourself?
Oh boy. Well, I identify quite a bit with technology. I mean, I grew up, my dad owned a hi-fi shop, and so I grew up in the hi-fi, around his hi-fi business. He was an electrical engineer himself, and he also, as a kid, I mean, he was born in 1918, and so as a kid, he was building crystal radio sets when there was only 3 stations in the whole United States. He lived in Philadelphia, he would listen to Chicago and New York. So he was just a tinkerer, loved technology that was ahead of his time. And I think it just kind of rubbed off on me, and so the technology stuff is something that's very important to me. And then and pretty much all my studies, getting an electrical engineering degree, all the companies I've done since then, it's all been focused around technology, because I love inventing things, building things that change the way other people do their jobs.
Wow.
We can, as engineers, fellow engineers, we can highly relate to it. We feel a strong bond there, which is exactly why we are doing masters as well. We want to innovate. We want to bring technology to impact people's lives and change the world for the good.
Yep.
Yeah, and you can't if you're a real engineer, not just a title of an engineer, but if you're a real engineer, every time you see a problem or something that doesn't work quite right, your first thought is, how can I make that work a little better? How can I streamline that process? So it's all about solving problems all the time, especially if there's a lot of people who need that problem solved.
And Jim, as a transition to this, you've done your undergrad and you have initial experience with being an engineer, but what prompted you to become an entrepreneur and make that move from being an engineering concentrated career towards an entrepreneur? What prompted that decision?
Well, when I was growing up, I just always assumed that the schooling system means you go to elementary school, junior high, high school, bachelor's degree, PhD. I just thought that's what you're supposed to do. So you don't stop until you get that PhD. And then I've always been interested in the sciences and math. I went to MIT, I got my undergraduate, and the first year into MIT, it was pretty intense. And it was a change of pace from high school, quite a bit, and the whole engineering rigmarole. And I finally decided, you know what? I think I'm going to take a break after I get this first degree and figure out what I want to do next. And when I graduated, still love engineering, obviously, and all that, but I really didn't know if I was going to go get a master's degree. I didn't know if I want to go more business oriented and then add to the engineering, or stay in the engineering and get a master's in engineering. So I decided I'm going to go out in the world, and I ended up working for a really interesting job. I went for Hewlett-Packard, large company, in the instrument group, and I was actually in the sales force. So I was a system engineer. I supported a sales team. So I was a technical support, met with customers, worked with customers, and helped create solutions from HP products to solve their problems. And then I actually carried a bag and sold. I was a salesman for 2 years and just absolutely loved it. And I just learned one of the most important jobs in life is just selling, because when you're in engineering, if you're in product marketing, you're always selling. You're going to your engineering team and saying, you don't tell them what to build, you sell them what they should be building. And just it's a negotiation as to what your engineering team should be building. But anyway, so after 4 years at Hewlett Packard, one of my buddies went back to Harvard for his MBA, and I just got the bug. Well, maybe it's time to go back and get it. And I actually thought I would get an MBA instead of an engineering. And then right then, 4 of the guys that I'd been working with at HP did a startup out in Silicon Valley and said, Jim, come out and join us. So I figured I'd just grow my hair long, be a hippie, and move to California. And that was the deal. If I went from a 30,000 person HP at that time to employee number 7 at this little startup, and that's it. I had the bug. I could never, loved Hewlett Packard. I could never go back to a big company again. So, and now today I'm in my 8th either startup or early stage company that I've been involved with since Hewlett Packard. Yeah.
What an amazing journey, Jim. So I would like to explore more about what your thoughts were when you started your first venture or your first startup. Like, what was your thought process like?
Well, so the first one, there was 4 founders that already started the company. I knew them, and then I joined them as an early engineer, one of the first outside engineers coming in to work with them. And in general, I mean, it was the thrill of my life, because I'm a Tennessee boy. I grew up in East Tennessee in the hills, and MIT was an exciting thing for me, and just a real, probably one of the most amazing adventures I've been in my life was going to MIT. But then moving out to Silicon Valley, all of a sudden I'm in Silicon Valley. I live in that place, and I live and it was just a thrill. Every time I get on an airplane, I was a mess. I'd always be nosy and ask the person next to me, "Who are you? Who do you work with?" Because if you get on a plane in San Jose or get on a plane in San Francisco, there's usually a vice president of some engineering company sitting next to you on the plane, and I want to meet him, And every time, and the day I was there in the 80s, and that was when disk drives were just going nuts. The price of disk drives were falling down, and the Seagate and Shugart and all the big disk drive companies were just going nuts out in Silicon Valley. And the whole career of engineering made a change at that point, right in the middle 80s, where instead of getting your degree, getting your master's degree, go to work for Lockheed, go to work for Hewlett Packard and work your life for 20 years, it became, when your project finished at Seagate, you looked for your next project at Seagate or at Shugart or at any other company. And engineers all of a sudden went project to project between companies. And where it used to be, if you look at someone's resume and they had more than one company, you'd say, well, you can't hold a job, can you? Now, if you don't have 5 companies in your resume, it's kind of like, if you only have 1 or 2 companies, it's kind of like, what's wrong with you? You're too stained in your ways. You don't think out of the box anymore. So anyways, it was fun. And what I noticed was at Hewlett Packard, I was employee number 32,102. I still remember that number. And they had a profit share that went back to employees, and it was based on profit for each quarter. And you could work your butt off, and then profit sharing actually went down 1/10 of a point. And then the next quarter, you could say, hey, I'm just tired from that last quarter. I need to just kind of back off a little bit. And profit sharing is up 2 points. It's like, what was my personal effect on the success of Hewlett Packard? It was great. It's fun. There's things you did and I learned. But then when I'm in this small company, if I don't do my job for a month, the company goes out of business. So it's a whole different perspective. And that's what a startup's all about. And all of a sudden, too, I took a big salary hit to go to this startup company. So I was making less money than I was making at HP. But I had a stock incentive. And all of a sudden, it's a little bit of gambling, but it really motivates you to, I want to do good. I want to do good for the company. I want to do good for the customers that we are going to try to build. And there's an upside to this, and I think since then, I've stayed in the startup community overall, and a lot of it is I like being at risk. I like making sure I'm mitigating my risks. I make sure that I want to make sure I'm at least comfortable getting by, but at the same time, I'd like the rest of that to be in risk, where there's there's an upside, and there's a reward for doing well.
Correct. Correct. And what would be like some of the challenges or fears that you had before having your first journey as an entrepreneur? Like, and now that you look back, what would be that challenge that you faced, that fear that you had that you might not consider as a challenge or a fear at that point?
Well, it was actually, so I did two companies out. I was involved with two companies in Silicon Valley. Both of them I would call more early stage rather than startups, because I joined them, a year after they got started, or a couple of years after they got started. So in essence, I had a salary. There wasn't any risk of it wasn't as big a salary as I'd had before. I could have had, but it was comfortable. So I didn't feel any financial risk. I'm still a single guy. I'm not married. I don't have kids and all that. Then a buddy of mine and I decided to do a startup on our own. And so the two of us just jumped in. And that's a different experience. It's different being employee number 1 and 2 than being employee number 7 even, let alone employee number 20. And we joked that our company we were VC funded, which is Visa card funded. So we basically took out every Visa card we could get, and we're using that to fund our company. And I will if there's any other entrepreneurs that hear this podcast, don't do that. Because the Visa companies, those Visa guys, as soon as you miss that one payment, all of a sudden that interest rate goes to 25, 30%, and you can't recover from it. You can't recover. So you can't do that, And so that was terrible. And all of a sudden in that company, indelibly on my brain was the 15th and 30th of every month. That's when we had to make payroll, and I finally learned that there's no need, after I make payroll on the 30th, I can't worry about the 15th for at least 10 days. Yeah. So I can't start tomorrow. I got to just start working on how are we going to make money? How do we make the next sale? What do we do next? So you're thinking that, but I'm just not worried about the 15th until I get to about the 11th. And then I figure out how we're going to make payroll the 15th. And you really kind of learn to discipline yourself, that you just can't be paranoid all the time about that next thing that's going to happen. You just have to perform, and you got to do. And then if you put the energy in and everything else is there, things will just tend to kind of fall the way they're supposed to. At least that's my zen.
That's wonderful. But Jim, what do you remember your first success, like in the world of startups, or your journey as an entrepreneur? What do you consider to be your first success, and what were you thinking then?
One of the proudest things that, and there's all kinds of products we built and released and this, that, and the other. There's an awful lot of, the journey of it is way more exciting than the money that we've made along the way. It's just all that. But one of the very first things that happened in that first startup out of HP that I still am very proud of and excited about, and that was 35 years ago. We were a mechanical engineering software company. We built software for people that did structural testing, where they take car bodies and shake them and try to figure out what the resonant frequencies are on noise problems and things, the fatigue problems. And so we wrote software that would actually test the system and show you all these animated mode shapes and things like that. And we partnered with companies that made the analyzers that actually made the measurements, the frequency measurements on the car bodies and aircraft and things. So Hewlett-Packard, the division we worked with before, we went right back to them and said, we got this great software that makes your analyzer work better, and they OEM'd it from us. So one, that's a huge success to be a little company with 7 or 8 of us, and we've got a $1 billion company buying our product and selling it for us. So that was exciting first. But then 2 years later, we were very successful with them, and their head of marketing came down to visit us and said, I got some good news and bad news. The good news is, you guys have been great. We love your software. We've been selling a load of it. Well, the bad news is, we're going to cut you guys off because we're going to build our own version of this and sell it. And this was in the days of Hewlett desktop computers, basically running the software and everything. And the Windows system had just come out, Windows 1, which you probably never saw. Back 1984, I think it was, 1985. And so we decided, it was myself, we hired one other engineer, and we just said, we're going to shift all of our software over to Windows and have a desktop version. And we did it in 6 months. We pulled off this window that was absolutely gorgeous. And all the software before ours, Hewlett Packard's, was all command line driven. We typed in commands to make the software work. And so I went up to the division at Hewlett Packard, Santa Clara division, and I said, I got some good news and bad news for you guys. The good news is, we appreciate working with you. We appreciate this last quarter we've been working with you. We still made a lot of money with you. Thank you. Bad news is, I want to show you a new product that we're getting ready to introduce. And they showed them the Windows. They couldn't believe it. And I said, and we told them, you're welcome to still continue working with us, if you want to, or otherwise we've got other people working with. And then a month later, they canceled their product and got with us. And so we basically in 6 months built a product and had a $1 billion company cancel their product because of what we were doing. And that was, I still look back on that and said, man, that was cool.
That was massive.
That is massive. Like,
Yeah.
and HP was like the biggest company of that time.
They're still a huge company. All the way back then, they were the, they were the engineering, scientific company. And I was there right when they made the transition where they hit half and half scientific instrumentation and computers, because they'd been a instrumentation company. Then computers caught up the year I left them actually. So, yep, that was fun.
Seems very exciting. And what did you consider as the good part of being an entrepreneur? Like, what are the benefits or the perks that you see, and what is that gives you satisfaction to be an entrepreneur?
Or something that you strive for.
Yeah, I'll give you a great example of that. So one of the things I've done that when I first moved to Colorado, actually about 15, 16 years ago, I ended up getting involved with a group called CTEC, Colorado Technology Incubator. So we were one of the early incubators before Techstars, and before Galvanize, way before Galvanize. So we were one of the very first, incubator type, groups. And I was the director in the Boulder office so I worked with a lot of startups. In fact, I used to say my job was I met 12 people every week that claimed to be Jesus, and one of them just might be Jesus, so I got to be careful. But it was a lot that it was the most fun I'd ever had was working every day. I'm working with a bunch of companies that every single one of them is working on the most exciting idea in the world. So them, they're all exciting. They're all technology people. It's a great stimulating environment. And I get to see, I think I sat through 150 different pitches in 2 years, for the startup company. That was really exciting. But what happened was one of the companies I'm working with and I'm mentoring and helping get their business plans together, get ready to go try to get financing. They take off and be super successful, make a lot of money. Was it because of me? A little bit, maybe not. And then another company just fell on their face. Was that because of me? Maybe not. Because it's that CEO of that company that they take any advice I give them, any advisors that I hook up with them. They listen to all those, they interrogate them, and they integrate it, but then they make that decision. They've got the responsibility to what they do. And at some point, I got antsy as time. I need to take responsibility again. So I ended up jumping onto another startup company called Aware here in Colorado. And I'm all of a sudden now, I'm back. It's like, if we do well, yeah, it's a big hunk because I'm here. If we fall on our face, it's because I'm here. So it's like, it's back to... And so I'm all of a sudden back at risk again, but I just feel like you're taking responsibility, and in every decision you make has an impact on the people that you work with and on your customers that you're working with. So that's what being to me, that's what being an entrepreneur is. It's creating some interesting products, but it's being in a place that you have an experience at your hands are in the product when you're building it, not just on the outside. So it's that total immersion.
Absolutely makes sense. Jim, now let's make a slight shift into what is happening at the moment with Luminastra for you.
Yeah. Well, and this is actually an interesting little story is that, how do you start a company? I was talking to someone the other day. We were just sitting there saying, you're a smart guy. I'm a reasonably smart guy. We both can get excited. Let's just start a company tomorrow. Well, how do you do that? How do you start a company tomorrow? And for me, when I left Aware that's now 6 or 7 years, but I'd been out of Aware for 5 years. I took a few months off. Then I just started, okay, time to kind of get re-engaged again. And I had a couple of other buddies. We did a couple of startup ideas. We went a few months and just said, nope, can't figure out how to make money out of this. Nope, can't figure out who the real customer is going to be. And we canned a couple of ideas. And it's kind of like dating, when you say, okay, I'm ready to start dating. It's like, just the first person you meet, great, let's get married. I mean, it takes 15, 20 times before you do it. And the same thing, if you to find a reasonable idea that actually has some traction that someone's not already doing is not a trivial thing. And you really need, and that's my best advice to anybody is network. Just what you guys are networking by doing this podcast. You're meeting a lot of interesting people, and get out. And one of my buddies used to say, if you want to get hit, you got to go play in traffic. You can't stand on the sidewalk. So, and that's what networking is putting yourself in places that you're going to get hit. And you get hit a bunch of times and finally something good. And so basically after 5 years, and one of the things I did was I did volunteer work with the tech transfer office at CU, which is really exciting because I ended up working with a lot of professors to help them figure out if their inventions or their patents, were they commercializable? How would you go about commercializing it? And so back that stimulating thing where I'm not making decisions, but I'm meeting a lot of people. They have great technology at the university, especially deep technology, things that really solve hard problems, engineering problems. And I had a selfish eye that if I really saw something really cool, I might want to jump back in myself. And that happened. I met a woman named Zoya Popovich. She's a professor in the EE department, and she's run the radio frequency lab for 30 years, 3 decades. She's brilliant. And she's fun to be with. She's just a quintessential. She's a distinguished professor, an IEEE fellow. She just got inducted into the National Academy of Engineers. She's Caltech PhD. I mean, she's just brilliant. And bottom line, she had an invention that I thought was fascinating, and it was back at my EE roots, not software. It's just hardware, which is kind of exciting again. And what this is technology for a sensor that I could place anywhere in your body on the outside, so it's a wearable, and wherever I place it, it will measure the internal body temperature several centimeters below the skin. So if I put it on your forehead, immediately, real time, we see your brain temperature. If I put it over where you've an organ that you've got a tumor, like in your pancreas, we can actually directly measure the temperature of that tumor, because there's a really powerful technique that if you heat a tumor up slightly, by 3 or 4 degrees C, then it becomes 40% more vulnerable to any chemotherapy you go through. So it can be much more effective. And so what we found was the first thing I did when I ran across this technology, I thought it was interesting, but I went out and did about 20 interviews and that's another little recommendation I'd make for any entrepreneur is immediately, if you have an idea, don't just think it's an idea, go out and test it with people. Call up, go find doctors, in my case, find doctors, physicians, Medicare people, anybody who is interested, might be interested in temperature of the body I talked to. And I wanted to, and the things I was trying to solve was, is there already a product out there I just don't know about? Because the thermometers have been around for a long time. Is there really a market? Is there really a need to have something different? And is this different enough? And after 20 interviews, we figured out, man, there is an unmet need. There's all kinds of opportunity here. It was super easy to talk to people because I had a unique product that nobody else had, and they all saw value. We had cardiothoracic surgeons. And I talked to them. One of the first ones we had a great interview with, and he just said, man, that completely changes. Like right now, we use a nasal temperature and a bladder temperature as a surrogate for the brain, and it's never the same. It's always different as we're trying to cool them down so we can shut the blood supply to fix an artery up here. And he said, man, if I could know what the brain temperature was, I know exactly when they hit my target temperature, start the surgery, get in, fix it, get out, warm them back up again. And we think that this sensor, well, this is a super dangerous surgery. It's aortic surgery, they call it. 17% of the people die during that surgery because it's so dangerous. We think by cutting the time down for the surgery at a time you're cold, we can save 20% of those lives, just with this little sensor. And this particular doctor said, hey, we want, if you could build these things and if you give me a box of these today, I would use it starting tomorrow. So that's when we said, okay, we got a product. And then basically what we ended up doing was we ended up working with Zoya at the university. We raised about $1.5 million so far at the university. And now we started focusing on raising money for the company. And we just got, I'm excited to tell you, you're one of the first people to know, that we just got our NSF, National Science Foundation, Phase 2, $1 million grant last week. And so we're extremely, so all of a sudden we're a real company now. So we could actually, and we're actually looking to hire an embedded software engineer right now, as well as a radio frequency engineer. So we're starting to grow the company now with that money. And we've got several different companies that are extremely interested in working with us, with this product. So we've still got risk. We still got a couple of technical things we haven't solved yet, but we're feeling pretty good about it. And this is still exciting. There's still no guarantee we're going to make it, but it's feeling better every day. And as Zoe and I were talking, we've gone from when we started the company, we actually thought 30% that we could actually make this thing work. So, I mean, you talk about, there's risk in this. And now we just got back a little gallium arsenide chip that replaces a whole 2x4 covered with chips from our first lab prototype. Now we got it down to one little chip and that replaces all that. And she plugged it in, tested it, and called me up and said, it's very quiet. Because that's our problem. There's a lot of noise from the outside world. And so all of a sudden, we've now gone to 70-30. We think we can make this work.
That sounds like a very amazing product that would save so many lives.
Correct.
Jim. What a fantastic idea.
And Jim, following up to this, why do you think you chose to solve this problem? What is the motivation behind it, and what is it that keeps you driven towards solving this problem?
So this one is actually, out of all the companies I've done, we've always had interesting products that had a niche, products where we had differentiation so that we could beat some competition out there and all. So there was a need for it. But most of it is, we had a lot of it. I've done a lot of engineering software and engineering tools and things. And in one sense, it's kind of like if my product works well, some engineer using my tool he gets to go home at 5 instead of having to keep working until 6. I can knock an hour out of their day, and that's good. That's productive. You make money doing that. But with this is an opportunity we have that to be able to potentially save just in one surgery, aortic repair, we might be able to save 1,000 lives a year that wouldn't have made it. It's pretty huge, and we think this is the kind of thing we think we can actually potentially replace the infrared scanners, because those have a lot of problems. It only measures your skin temperature. So if you've been in a hot car, you get tested for COVID, you're going to test positive for 30 minutes. And if your kid got hit by a snowball, they're going to test dead for about 30 minutes. So, it's lots of false positives, false negatives. So we think there's an opportunity because our technology is what we're doing is we're actually listening, the passive device, we're listening to black body radiation. It's basically electromagnetic radiation is given off by everything in the universe. We're a radio telescope that just listens very closely to tiny signals coming out of your body that are temperature proportionate. So we can actually, and we go to lower frequency, so we can actually go deeper than infrared can. So we're actually seeing internal temperature, not just the skin temperature here. So we think we can completely change the consumer market out there eventually. Things that are circadian rhythm. Your body normally goes slight changes up and down in temperature during the day, and it affects your sleep. It affects your fertility as part of that. So we think we might have a monitor that can predict fertility windows very, very accurately. So in the consumer space, and then in military, there's heat stress. We got soldiers that have died, from heat stress, that die from hypothermia, from from wading through bogs and lagoons in cold weather. We've actually just applied for an SBIR for the military for a wearable sensor for hypothermia and hyperthermia in military conditions. A lot of surgery applications and ICU. Anytime you've had a trauma to the brain, either a cardiac arrest. I mean, a lot of people here, know about Damar Hamlin, the Buffalo football player that had the cardiac arrest a month and a half ago. And what they did with the interview in New York Times, he went into the surgical unit. They intubated him to get oxygen into him. They sedated him, and then they cooled his body because you can't let the brain get any fever at all when it's compromised after cardiac arrest, after a stroke, or after brain trauma. And so they cool the body, but right now they were using his bladder temperature as a surrogate, so they overcool him, actually. So we think we can actually it'll be just an automatic if someone goes into and everybody heard of Damar Hamlin, but 1,000 people had cardiac arrest that day that we didn't hear about. Every day, 1,000 people, and 500 of them died. And so this is it's an application where there's 3 million people that could use our sensor pretty much every day or all year, or every year. So we think we have an opportunity here to affect, I'll call it a societal impact, and actually an impact that impacts not just a few engineers out there, but actually impacts everyone. And that's really exciting. And it was a big change. I've never done a medical device, and I guess that's one thing. It's been a thrill for me is I find myself about every 6 or 7 years not looking for a new company, but looking for a whole different industry to get into because I want to learn something else. That's my motivation. A lot of it is I want to learn something else. And the medical device thing, first times I joked that my partner Walter, the two of us doing this, we're working on our amateur medical degrees right now because we're having to learn so much about surgery and things. And I'll tell you what, I'm going to do a shout out to good old electrical engineers. I'm very biased, but I think electrical engineers are one of the top groups out there because they have to solve every kind of problem. So if you're an electrical engineer, you don't just do electrical stuff. You're typically doing electromechanical, electro-bio, robots. You have to have biosensors, mechanical actuators, AI. And a double E is right in the middle of the whole thing. And for us, that's the same. And so for me, that's the exciting thing is all of a sudden now I've gone from mechanical applications and on car bodies and aerospace things to now working on little tiny medical devices. And so it's a thrill to be able to do something. And this is a huge learning curve, man. I've read, I can't tell you how many dozens and dozens of papers I've read to understand body temperature and how disease affects it and all that kind of things. So always a learning experience.
Correct.
Sure. Thank you for taking us through the journey of how you even formulated the idea of bringing up this company, and you've told us about the milestones that Luminastra has reached already. But I would like to know more about what do you see for its future, like in the next coming years. Where do you see Luminastra?
Yeah. So that's always basically, when you're doing a startup company, what you always have is this moving 5-year plan that every month your 5-year plan changes. And so it's almost like every time you draw a plan, you already know this isn't the right one yet, but you have to have that plan. You have to have a vector of where you think you're going. And then you got to be flexible. You got to make sure you're always, always, always talking to customers and potential customers because they keep changing as you go along, and you want to make sure you're changing with them as you're building that product and everything. So you got to keep in touch with the outside world. And so what we're going to be doing right now is we just got this nice funding, and we've also, when we hit this $1 million from the National Science Foundation, that qualified us for a grant, a matching grant from the state of Colorado. The state of Colorado is a wonderful place that's trying to encourage, especially technology and new industries, into the state. So we in a competition, we won a grant for $250,000 that is a 50% match of any investment we make. So as soon as we hit the $1 million here, we instantly are qualified to get that now. So that $1 million is actually $1.25 million. And so we're going to be hiring a couple of good old double E engineers here immediately. So starting to grow the company. Probably a little bit down the road, we'll be hiring somebody for business development. I've been kind of doing that myself, and so we'll be hiring someone else to kind of take over that and get better at it than I am. Always hire people better than you are. That's the number one rule in building a company. And so the things coming up for us is we've got two big problems technical problems we have to solve. And once we get those, we have a handle. We've got like 5 techniques we're working on, and we hope that a combination of 2 of those is going to solve these 2 problems. And then we'll be able to start working on our miniaturization. And then we're hoping to do a pilot study with a surgeon here in Colorado, maybe this summer or early fall. So we actually start getting into a surgical and monitoring brain temperature while they do their surgery. So we just see if we're getting good data and we're okay with all the noise in a surgical unit with all the electronics they have these days. And then at that point, then we're ready to go for our FDA, Food and Drug Administration clearance, because we have to be approved by them that we're safe to be used, in a clinical environment. So we're hoping to start that by the end of the year, very first of next year. And then we're starting to work with surgeons and all right now. We're trying to cut off the time. So instead of building a product, getting your FDA approval, go find some surgeons that test it for you and think it's good, then they start buying it. We're actually working with surgeons right now with our prototypes, so we want them to buy in now. So when we get done with FDA, we're ready to sell. And so we think we can cut off several months of our sales timeline by working with people up front. And that's really, when you have a cool technology like we do, it's pretty easy to get, because when we talk to a surgeon, they just say, it's not like, that's interesting, let me know when you get there. They're like, can I help? How can I get involved? Can we help you with a study? And boy, that's exactly the kind of reaction you want, and all that. So it's going to be getting that, and then it's going to be working with partners and starting to sell product. And so that's where we are, is continue to grow the company. We're going to be finally starting to look for outside investment, because we know we're going to need, $5 and $10 million probably as we start to go into manufacturing large groups and things down the road. So that's what. And one thing that's really nice is the best time, another little piece of advice for your other entrepreneurs, is the best time to raise money is when you don't need to raise money. And so right now, like we've got $1 million in the bank, so we're pretty happy for the moment. It will go away in a hurry, but we got some money right now. I don't have to have other money. So now's a great time to start looking at other investors and say, look, if you put money into us right now, it's going to go with another $1 million from the National Science Foundation. So you're not investing by yourself. You're part of a family now of investment. So a better chance your money's going to work. So that's a good story to have.
Correct. Very exciting times ahead, Jim.
It is. And this last 3 or 4 weeks has just been phenomenal. I mean, we actually got this money, able to start hiring. I mean, that's what it's all about. That's the fun part of building a company and getting other people that are equally excited to be part of the company,
And now let's kind of fall back and if you reflect on your journey, and if you had to start over again, what would be the advice that you'd give yourself at that point?
Start all the way back.
Your journey as an entrepreneur.
Well, I mean, I think there's absolutely an excitement in entrepreneurship and being early in a company and early in an idea that to me it's hard to find any place else. I'm very happy I went to Hewlett Packard first, because I learned a lot by being in a company that's already very successful. And it's really funny, when we started our company, the spin out, we thought HP is a great company. We all loved HP. And we would all go back, and we'd go back if we had to. But we thought, well, HP's gotten so big that they've lost track of keeping in touch with customers. We can do better because we're small. We can keep in touch with customers. And then I never forget that over the next several months, every couple of months, we'd say, okay, that's why HP used to do this. It's like we just kept we kept learning the lessons that HP already had learned. And so there's definitely, I think, working for a bigger company for a short time at least was a good experience for me. And so I wouldn't be afraid when you get out of school that you go work for a Hewlett Packard or some larger company and take notes the whole time you're there about learn how they do their processes. See if you can find try to meet as many people in there as you can, because it could be some of your fellow co-startups people that you meet while you're at that new company, But the only other advice I just say is generally that I would do even faster is when you start a company, surround yourself with other people, mentors and other people that can help you. And so when we started Luminastra here, I'd kind of already learned that lesson. So the first thing I did was I immediately ended up inviting Zoe at the university to join the company, be a co-founder, to get a buddy of mine, Walter, who's 20 years, he was director of engineering for Seagate, got him to join the company. So we had a nice core of good people that met several of the big things. So get a founding team around you, and it's worth giving up a hunk of your stock in ownership to have good people around you, because that makes the whole, as they say, don't worry about the slice of your pie. Worry about the pie. Make the pie bigger, and then your slice will get bigger too. Even as your slice gets smaller percentage, it still gets bigger. And so surround yourself with advisors. Seek the advice. I mean, I've got a couple of very trusted outside people I've known for years that every decision we make, I'll bounce it off of them to make sure that I'm not underthinking or overthinking something, and all that. So having some outside advisors, they can help you connect. And the other thing too is just I'd get back into the outside world of the networking. Any place I can get a chance to meet other entrepreneurs, get to meet other people that are investors and things, just find those opportunities and go do them. There's lots of, CU has a couple of entrepreneurial groups, the Silicon Flatirons. There's Rocky's Venture Club. There's several entrepreneurial kind of organizations around Colorado, and get involved with all of them, and go to those things, meet people, talk to them. And one of my professors at MIT, he used to say that he lived by 3 mantras. Get up early, tell everybody everything you know, and make deals with a handshake, keep moving forward. And the second one, tell everybody everything you know, is super important. So when you meet somebody and they say, well, I work in real estate, what do you do? The wrong answer is, I do something really technical, you wouldn't understand it. What you do is, I'm working on the most exciting thing in the world right now. We do this, we do that, and all that. And lo and behold, that real estate person says, well, one of my clients is the head of cardiac surgery at the Centura Hospital. Would you like to meet him? Yes, I would, So you never know where any meeting with anybody can go. So tell everybody everything you know.
That were all great advices, Jim. And then on the similar note, for folks starting off now, like probably us or someone of our age or someone who's just starting off with entrepreneurship, what would your advice for them be?
Well, a little bit of what I was just kind of talking about there is that, get out and try to get out and meet people. Don't be afraid to ask those people to introduce you to other people. And because one of the best ways to meet people is actually with an introduction. So if, it's like, even for someone you want to meet, it's like you could reach out to them, and you probably should, but if you can find some other person that that could just give what we call a warm introduction, just say, hey, Fred, you need to meet Jim. He's a buddy of mine, and he's got a really cool company. That changes the chances of you being able to talk to that person, And I'll tell you one thing too, that, the big thing now is LinkedIn, and there's an opportunity to find a lot of people and talk to, and find who are the people that do this and that and the other, and who's the important people in this company. One of my number one rules is I never send an invitation. It's just hit hit the request button and let it go with the default that says, hey, I'd like you to join my network. If people send that to me, I pretty much throw them away. I mean, I'll look to see what their resume is and see if it's someone I really want to know, but generally I throw them away. If I send an invitation to someone, I say, I'm Jim. I got a really cool company doing a wearable sensor and for cardiac surgery. I would really be honored if you would join my network, and I'd love to talk to you because I know you're one of the leading whatever in the whole world, and I'd love your opinion. So personalize that, make people feel good when you want to meet them, but meet people. Just get out and meet people, because it takes a lot of people to make your company successful.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. And before we break off for the meeting, like one quick question, Jim. What is it that keeps you going? Like you've been a serial entrepreneur, worked at several companies, including HP. You've also worked with Techstars. Now you have your own organization. Even at this age, like what keeps you going?
It's still that engineering vein we're all stuck with, which is we see a problem, we got to solve it, and it's still a thrill to me to be able to to try to solve problems, and it's more fun when you solve a problem that helps a lot of other people. But really, when you get but that's sort of the underlying current. But the real thing that keeps it going is the interaction with. I mean, we've built up a great team. Zoya. In fact, I joke that with her, I tell her that the reason I started this company was so I get a chance to work with you and not have to get a PhD. So, because everybody else that works with her is working on a PhD, and to me, what's really gets me excited is like I had a meeting at 10 o'clock last night, called Zoya up. We talked for half an hour about some new people we're trying to hire, and then interviewing people to hire them, and then building a team. That's really the cool thing is actually building a team, because you have to have a team to be successful, and you need good people. And I always go back to my Steve Jobs story from one of his interviews one time where he said, type A people hire type A people. Type B people hire type C people. They want to manage those. They want to overrun those people. So never hire a type B person. Always hire type A. And I'll let you figure out what that means as far as what's a type A and a type B. But bottom line is always, as I said before, always hire people better than you are. And always hire great people, because especially in a startup, you can't hire someone to take on a key role and then 6 months in where they're really coming up to speed, they don't work. You've just lost 6 months and may have lost the market. It's not like if you're Hewlett Packard at 30,000 people, if they had a bad person, it doesn't hurt that much. It hurts one segment, one little geography, one little place a little bit, but doesn't affect the whole company. In a startup, every single person is the most important person in the world. And that's the fun of it. It's finding those people and then having those interactions to do it. And quite honestly, Zoom calls and things like this and remote working has gotten a lot better with all the new Zoom technologies and stuff like that. But I'm still just enough old fashioned. There's nothing that beats 4 people sitting in a room with a whiteboard. You accomplish so much. There's so much because that's what's fun. That's what keeps me going too. It's the innovation. It's the coming, because you're always coming up with new problems, and you can either just solve them, or you can completely blow them away and actually come up with a whole different angle that actually fixes 3 other things you haven't even thought about yet. And that's the fun and that innovation happens when you get 2, 3, and 4 minds interacting in real time together. That's when the real good ideas come. And you can get some of that out of Zoom, and it's not bad to keep progressing with that, but you got to allow a certain amount of time that everybody gets in a room and just goes nuts and thinking about new ideas and what are all the problems we have right now we need to solve. So those kind of interactions are what it's a thrill for me. We had a meeting yesterday. One of our engineers working on this thing, we're trying to come up with how do we actually, we're making our first real prototype we can actually take in the field, which is exciting on its own. And we're getting a new layout of a board. It's so much fun to see your product go from a 2x4, it's this big, down to a chip that's that big. And then now we got to figure out how to package it. And so my buddy Walter hooked us up with a guy who's just this great manufacturing guy, east of Denver. And so we had this manufacturing guy, we had our engineer, Walter and I were all on this call, and we're sitting there, and this engineer who'd never even heard of us before, he says, okay, I get it. Well, how about if we just make a little cup like this, and we can then press fit it over that, we can spray a little copper on there to give you the shielding you need. And so it's just like, yeah, that works. That'd be great. And he just said, show me a picture of this thing. Well, here's our circuit board. Well, what's it look like if you turn it sideways? Okay, well, how about if we try this? And our engineer just got all excited because he's a super brilliant guy. He's a double E and a physics guy. But yeah, he's not into packaging kind of stuff. He's trying to figure out, as any engineer, any good old double E like you would do, if you're faced with a problem, you'll try to solve it. So he was trying to come up with some way to make a cap for this thing. And all we did was get this guy from the outside. He says, here's what you do, and I can make these for you next week. So that's the fun part of those, the kind of interactions like that.
It has been amazing, Jim, getting to know about your journey and just the fun of being an engineer and an entrepreneur. It was so much fun knowing about your experiences and your thoughts about this. We really appreciate your time.
Well, it's a lot of fun. It's always fun to talk about the things that get you excited, and you hit all my hot points there today. And it's good to see more young and entrepreneurial types like yourself being innovative and actually taking advantage of technologies that are just coming on board here to leverage yourselves and leverage other people into it. So good job for you guys.
Thanks, Jim.
That was an amazing conversation, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. Like, I felt he was very driven and he had the passion to solve a problem by applying his engineering abilities. And I feel that as an engineer, it's a very important skill to have. What do you think?
I completely agree. And I also think that that's an important skill for an entrepreneur to have as well, to like solve problems. And in the conversation we had, the advice that he had for budding entrepreneurs, that struck a chord with me, because those advices, actually those skills, though easily overlooked, are some of like the most important, like to have the right team, to have the right kind of people around you so that you can learn and grow from them, and to network. All of those were amazing advices, and we hope that you like this conversation as much as we did.